Morning. It's a good time of worship. I love how so many, if not all of the songs focused on who He is. As we could get a lot more right about what we think and about what we feel if we just spent a lot more time focusing on who He is, instead of what we might be feeling or thinking or going through or what the world looks like around us. Just thinking about a couple of spots in our worship dealing with that sort of thing. And the one, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid because everything changes when I speak your name. And I don't know about you, maybe you picture some fantastic scene in a moment like that. Dramatic music's playing and some soldier standing up and saying, I'm not afraid. And I speak His name and moving into the battle victorious and all that. I don't see that. I see this 4 or 5-year-old kid scared to death, about to have to do something he or she really doesn't want to do. And a mother or a father down on one knee looking him in the eyes saying, you're a big boy, you're a big girl, you need to do this, you can do this, right? And that kid going, yeah. I'm telling you, it's going to be okay. I'm not afraid. And we laugh at that. This kid trying to believe what mom and dad are saying because he or she trusts them. And knowing that they need to do this, and that part of them believing the parent and believing it's going to be true, but they're still scared. And then they're saying it. And every time you see something like that in a movie or even in real life, there's a part of you going, you little liar. You are so scared. But they do it, right? They're able to keep going, and they do that because they weren't lying. They were telling the truth. Yeah, they felt fear, they felt afraid, but they trusted whoever was telling them it was going to be okay, that they could do this more than they were afraid, because when you're more afraid than your trust, you don't move. Or you move the other way. You don't gut up and do something if you're more afraid than your trust. And every time that kid does that, he or she learns to trust their parent a little bit more. Until I ain't scared means I'm not afraid. Instead of bravado, blustering because you're scared. See, we might hear that and think, I shouldn't ever be afraid, and if I feel any fear, then I'm falling short. But that's not the truth. It's, I don't let that fear rule me. I am not afraid. I am a child of God who trusts His Father, who feels some fear. There's a difference. It matters. It's not a sin to be afraid. Jesus was afraid. You don't bust arteries and sweat drops of blood under stress if there's no fear and anxiety. If there's not some dread about what you're about to go through. But He rose up, strengthened after submitting Himself to the will of the Father, and went to the cross. Unafraid. Meaning not ruled by fear. That was awesome. I thought about that other line that talked about knowing and proclaiming that my eyes will see miracles and my eyes will see victories. The greatest miracle and the greatest victory on earth that has ever happened since the moment of creation until his return did not look like a miracle and did not look like a victory. Sometimes our eyes see miracles and victories, and our heart and our mind just cannot comprehend it. We don't see it. We don't get it. The disciples scattered because it sure didn't look miraculous. It looked like defeat. Most certainly didn't look like a victory. But that's who he is. Someone who's willing to let us think it's over, so he can show us that it's not. In his way, not ours. We can get stuck in thinking a miracle is when I get what I want the way that I want it, when it wouldn't have happened any other way. And victory is, well, that's easy. That's when I win. When I get what I want. Maybe I'm the only one like that. But the biggest miracle and the biggest victory, secondary to the cross, is when what I want no longer matters. When I, like Jesus, can bow the knee and say, not my will, but yours be done. That's a miracle, folks. If you know me at all, anytime I say, your will, not mine, be done, without having to be beat half to death first, it's a miracle. And I'm not saying God beats you half to death. I'm just saying I usually fight anybody's will but mine. That's who he is. He is a God of miracles and victories, but we may not completely see them. Not until after the fact. This time is a time that we focus on who he is and what he did. Now, Lee and I may be the only ones here who observe Lent. It's definitely not required. There are some things about it I don't do because I don't agree with. It's not going to earn anybody any brownie points with God. And the reason I bring it up is because it starts Wednesday. This Wednesday is the beginning. And it is a time of intense, should be, let me rephrase that. What it is intended to be is a time of intense focus on who he is. And the fact that God himself wrapped himself in flesh and came and did what we were always supposed to do and never could, even as Christians still can't. Not 100%, because we're not yet perfect like he is perfect. But he did it. And then he allowed that flesh to be ripped from his bones and his beard to be ripped from his face. And he was beaten and bruised until he was so unrecognizable that they thought it might be substituted somebody else for him. Till he spoke. Because it doesn't matter what you see with your eyes around you when God speaks. If you'll listen, you can recognize his voice. And he hung in the most painful place that the Romans, who had brought execution and torture to an art form, could think of, publicly displayed and humiliated, rejected, mocked, laughed at. Like that's worse than the stripes on your back? It might be. Ask somebody who's been rejected and laughed at their whole life if they'd rather just take a whipping. Till the weight and the shame and the guilt of my sin and yours caused him to die hours and hours before the physical should have. because what goes on in our hearts and our heads matters. That pain, that rejection, that suffering he did for us. And if we spend 40 days or so thinking about, meditating on, praying on, focusing on, what kind of God does that? What does it say about him? How much love does it take? And you'll come out the other side when you celebrate that he came out of the grave, coming out of your grave of shame, of doubt, of confusion, of wondering, how could God love me? Maybe not. I still wonder how. I also wonder, how gravity works sometimes. But you'll know that he did. You know that he does. That he loved us as we are, not as we should be, but he loved us enough not to leave us as we are. So he, in a very short period, suffered more than you and I will ever suffer. And he did it for you. And it'll change your life if you spend some time thinking about it, focusing on it, remembering who he is.